As parents, we know that it's normal for children to feel worried, stressed, anxious, or down at times. But how do we work out if they have a mental health issue? Is it when our young ones can't sleep by themselves because they're afraid? Or older teens needing to drink excessively to enjoy themselves with friends? Or when they lock themselves away from their families and turn to self-harm? There are approximately 700,000 young Australians with a mental health disorder. Today, we'll be talking to a mother, a teacher, and an underwear model to help us learn more about child and adolescent mental health. Hi, I'm Sally Ann and I'm a clinical psychologist, wife and mother of 4. I have this incredible opportunity to host an interesting and informative show like this, and I feel very privileged and humbled. I know you'll enjoy it too. Nick Bracks has been a Headspace ambassador for a number of years. He shares his struggle with depression and substance abuse as a teen to help other young men who are struggling to get help for their issues before their lives get off track. But first, here's a little bit about Nick's story.
An embarrassed Premier Steve Bracks has labelled his son an absolute idiot after he crashed his car during an overnight drinking binge.
I think it was a Thursday night. We'd been out and we got a taxi back to my place. So we did the right thing there, and then I stupidly decided to go for a drive in the family car, going about 90 k's an hour in a 60 k zone, and went to do a U-turn over a traffic island and just lost control and wrapped the car around a tree.
He told us that he did a stupid thing. He's very remorseful. He's done the wrong thing. He's been an absolute idiot. At
that moment in my head, that was the turning point. I thought after that, well, this is, I knew that I had a problem, but I wasn't really acknowledging it, and I thought, well, this is too much. I've got to change something. And then I sort of slightly changed my habits over 2 weeks. I didn't go out, didn't drink, but still didn't really deal with it. And I sort of, told my parents and told everyone, no, I've got to do something. But I think I wasn't really in the right headspace to really change it, and also didn't know how to change it. And that just led to, more of the same patterns of going out and drinking on a Thursday, Friday, Saturday night as a coping mechanism, and then sort of delaying the problem. So I guess what I found with all of it was that you're sort of getting help and then also getting some sort of structure and just doing a few things was the best sort of way to really gradually get out of it. If you are going through these sort of symptoms, that it's nothing to be ashamed about, that you should be open about it, you shouldn't feel bad about seeking help, about talking to friends or whatever it is. I mean, it doesn't mean that there's something wrong with you, it just means that you've got an issue that needs to be dealt with, and it's very common.
So thanks so much for joining us on the Sally Ann Show, Nick. I really appreciate you coming. Now, one of the things, it must be really hard for you. Every single teen has trouble growing up, I think, and becoming teenagers. But you had it even tougher. You grew up in the media with your dad. So tell us a little bit about when you first realised that you had a mental health issue.
Yeah, that made it more difficult, I guess.
Yeah.
But I mean, it's a different journey for anyone who's suffering a mental health issue. So I think that probably part of my story that added to it. I didn't really realise I was suffering from mental health issues or have real problems till just after I'd finished high school. So
okay, so you didn't have it. There were no signs in high school for you at all. So there may not have been. I'm just wondering, sometimes people, I mean, there's sleep issues, but sometimes people get, I don't know, anxious or a little bit down, but it didn't happen for you?
Looking back on it, there were. I mean, I've always had a very active mind. I've always had, I guess, obsessive tendencies, and probably suffered a bit of anxiety. Was a very shy kid. So a lot of that would have led to, problems later on.
Yeah. Because actually being a shy kid and again having the media in your face all the time must have been difficult, because I think, you know, we all know that everyone has issues when they're growing up. We all make mistakes, we all do, you know, really dumb things, and we hope that we make it through to the end. But for you, as we just saw in the clip before, that, you know, you had some issues that were highly public, and that must have made things, you know, 10 times worse, I guess, for you at that point in time. Tell us a little bit about what happened after school when you sort of started realising there were issues.
Yeah, I finished school. All I wanted to do until I was 18 was be a professional athlete, and trained quite obsessively at middle distance running and competed at a fairly high level. And I had a really bad knee injury when I was 18 and had to stop for 2 years. So that coincided with me finishing high school. I was, like I said, I was a very shy kid, probably didn't develop a lot of the social skills that I needed, and then finished and felt lost, didn't really know where I wanted to go, and that led to me just spending a period of time with no direction, dropping out of university, going out drinking and having no direction and feeling helpless and lost, and having those media incidents, I guess, heightened it. I don't think it was the catalyst for it, but I mean, it doesn't make it easier.
No, exactly. And tell us a little bit about the drinking. So that was obviously your strategy to deal with what was going on for you, is that right? Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, I don't think it was so much a strategy. I think I wasn't conscious of it being a strategy. It was more, I didn't know what was wrong with me. I enjoyed the feeling, it gave me confidence, and it was a way to escape. And for that moment when I was drunk, I'd be able to forget about everything and feel free, but then you'd feel worse the next day. So I didn't really know what was wrong with me at the time, and that was the only way I would cope. So I naturally just kept reverting back to it. Yeah.
So one of the things, look, another thing that happens sometimes is withdrawal from family and friends, that sort of thing. Did that happen to you? Was that one of the signs or not?
Yeah, definitely a lot. In that, especially in the year when I'd been overseas after school and come back, dropped out of university course, and then I had a 12-month period where I was really at my lowest point, and I was isolating myself from seeing friends, from socialising. The only socialising I would do would be when I was out just writing myself off, getting drunk. And didn't want to see people, didn't feel like I had anything to contribute, and I guess was locking myself away and just staying in bed as long as I could, didn't want to face the world. So it really was a lot of isolation and not feeling worthy of being around other people.
So I know that you do a lot of work now with Headspace. I'm just wondering, what advice would you give to young people that are going through the same thing? They're feeling really down, you know, they don't know what to do with themselves, they're probably not wanting to do studies or whatever it is that they might be doing. What advice would you give them?
I mean, I would say that, number one, it's okay to feel that way. It's really important to acknowledge that it's not, you know, it's something that you can talk to people about and not feel like it's, not have that taboo there, not feel like it's something that means you've got a huge problem with yourself. It's an illness like anything else, and have people that you trust that you can talk to, whether that be a friend or family, or go into a Headspace clinic if you don't feel confident enough to go and talk to someone. And knowing that, you know, we don't always have all the answers, and we don't have to have the perfect scenario at that given point in time. Just sort of always take it one step at a time. Yeah,
so the basic message is, you know, acknowledge it and do something about it. Go and tell someone is your message. Awesome.
Yeah, I think have people you can talk to. Yeah, definitely.
Thanks so much for being part of the show, Nick. I really appreciate it. Thank you for sharing your story. After the break, we're going to meet a teacher who will let us know what it's like to deal with mental health issues in the classroom.
A young girl who told me that she was cutting herself.
Rosetta Batsakis is a mother of 3 who has taught in all 3 systems of schools, including single-sex and co-ed, over the past 30 years. So welcome, Rosetta. Thanks for coming to the show.
Thanks for having me, Sally.
That's all right. Now tell me, being a teacher, what's it like dealing with children in your class that have mental health issues?
The hardest part is not knowing that they have mental health issues, and then being surprised when you find out, because there is that privacy issue, which is a valid reason. Counsellors can't divulge it, but sometimes the student will tell you, and you don't really find out until you get into about term 2, because you build up a relationship with those students. I've found that girls tend to tell you more than boys will. But that might come out because you might be wondering why they haven't done their homework, or why they've been away. So you might just ask the casual question, and all of a sudden you get told, well, haven't been able to get out of my bed for 5 days, and then you really don't know what to do with that, and your teacher instincts come in, because you've been dealing with adolescents, or I've been dealing with adolescents for a long time. My maternal instincts kick in, and so I try to answer or ask the right questions. Sometimes I find that they are seeing a school counsellor, or sometimes I find that they're not, and the school doesn't know. So then it's my job to pass that information on to the counsellors. After that, though, I don't know what happens, because we're not in the loop.
And it's hard for you, I guess, not being in the loop. Like, it's understandable, and that's the way that it is, but it's difficult for you because you really need to know what to ask and what not to ask. You're lucky because you've got the fallback of being a mum and being able to deal with them, but not all teachers are mums. And
we don't really get professional training because there's a lot of training on anaphylaxis, there's a lot of training on asthma, there's training on learning disabilities and how we can support those students, but we don't get enough training. If I've had very little training in the 30 years of how to take notice of the students, to be able to pick up on those little hints and those clues of something being wrong, and then knowing what questions to ask.
Because that's the thing in a classroom, and I'll ask you a question about what presentations you have in a classroom, but the thing in a classroom is that you don't really know which children have mental health issues, because it could be the child that's sitting quietly and withdrawn in the classroom, but it could also be the child that's throwing chairs around the room or screaming and yelling. It may be the sarcastic child or the clown. It could be any one of them. In terms of your experiences in a classroom, what sort of mental health issues have you seen? I imagine there'd be some self-harm and that sort of
I've had a young girl who quite a few years ago told me that she had attempted suicide.
Wow.
I've had another young girl who told me that she was cutting herself. A young boy that I taught a few years ago recently suicided. So it's very sad, it's very hard, because teachers go into the profession because they care. They are caring people, and it doesn't matter whether you teach, my area is maths, it doesn't matter whether you teach mathematics or you teach history or whatever. You go in there because you care about young people, and when those kinds of things happen and you feel lost, it does affect you. It's not impersonal. It's meant to, it's not impersonal.
And that's the thing, is you go in to be a teacher to teach the whole person, and the whole person isn't just about the maths side or the English side or whatever type of thing that you're teaching, but it is the whole person, the mental health side as well. And we know that mental health is such a huge issue for these students. So it must be quite alarming for teachers, particularly ones that aren't as experienced as you, I would imagine, to have their students say to them, look, I'm self-harming, or, I just want to kill myself. And they mean it. So some have just the thoughts, but some actually have the actions as well.
And then they go to the counsellors, and you may get some an email, or you may have a meeting to say, watch out for this, this and this, but that child is back in your classroom, and we really need to be better equipped in knowing how. We don't need to be the professional counsellor, but we need to have some clues, and there needs to be more dialogue. And anaphylaxis and all those are compulsory training. We have to have certificates. We can't get our registration without those. And I honestly believe that mental health issues are a growing issue in adolescence, and we need better training.
There's more mental health issues than there are of a lot of those other physical conditions. So it is really important to do that. I think in classrooms, the other part, when you were saying before about hearing that a child is feeling suicidal or that sort of thing, you do need to have not just the referral base to the school counsellor, which is awesome, it's great that schools have that, but you also need to have the training of what to do, what not to do. And it's interesting for me as a clinical psychologist, because I see lots of children, adolescents, when I talk to teachers and I'll say, look, if with permission, this child is going through whatever issue it is, you know, we need to not worry so much about homework or that sort of thing. And I'll have teachers yell at me and say, I'm sorry, my, you know, subject is so important that they are going to do the work. And there's, you know, they just don't have the training for me to be able to say sometimes
this is the understanding.
Absolutely.
And it's also, I think we need to, you see, sometimes it's also what not to say.
Yeah,
you need to know what not to say. And I would rather it was proactive than post-active. I would rather be taught in advance about these issues, and even knowing which ones are mental health issues, and what are the signs, and what I can say and what I can't say. I would rather know that before something a student has told me, or before something happens, rather than after it's happened.
Absolutely. Look, Rosetta, thanks so much for letting us know what mental health is like in a classroom. After the break, we're going to talk to Nicky Johnston, a parent with 4 children, one of whom has anxiety. Stay tuned.
It was almost like he had this monster worry thoughts.
Nicky Johnston is a mum to 4 boys, an educator, speaker, and an author of books helping children with resilience and emotional well-being. Her book, Go Away Mr. Worrythoughts, is a wonderful resource for children battling anxiety. Now, you're a mum of 4 boys. When did you realise that your son had an issue with anxiety?
Look, I think I think it was very early on. I actually do believe that he had it right from birth when I suffered postnatal depression. And I did notice probably around 3, about 3 or 4, I could see some instances with him at kinder, particularly at kinder.
And so tell us about what that was like for him.
So he was extremely hesitant of new things, didn't want to try new things, really quite reserved, so he didn't want to participate in a lot of, you know, singing and dancing and costumes and things like that, but very nervous around doing the wrong thing as well.
Yeah. What was it like for you then? Because you must have realised that he was not, you know, jumping in and participating in the activities.
Yeah, so basically by the about 4-year-old kinder, I was able to actually discuss with the teachers about, you know, what my thoughts were, and they kind of agreed, and that was kind of when we started the ball rolling, just to kind of work out what was the issue and how could we help him.
Yeah, so you realised at that point that it was anxiety?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because was there a history of that in your family or your husband?
Well, yes, me.
Yeah,
So I think what I could see was I could see myself as a little one.
So what have you done over the years then? Because he's no longer in primary school and preschool.
No. So when he started at primary school, that was when sort of I could really see a drastic change where he would really catastrophise things, and it was almost like he had this monster worry thoughts, hence my children's book.
Yes.
So I wrote him a story to help him beat his worry thoughts, and he named it Mr. Worrythoughts, and that's sort of where I guess where the stories come, and then where the rest of the journey for me has come out of this as well.
Yeah, because one of the things that I'll just share with the audience here is that Nicky's a painter, an artist, and so she created this book called, and many others since, but Go Away Mr. Worrythoughts, and that was really for your son. I believe you painted it and you took it to school, and what happened?
Yeah, so I took it to the school, and the teachers really loved it and they kept it. It was just in a loose leaf folder, and that was when we sort of went, wow, we really need to make this into a real book, and that's what we did.
And here you are now with a number of books under your belt.
Yes.
So what would you tell parents who, if someone who isn't an artist,
Yeah.
a painter, what advice would you give them to do with their child if they realise that they're not participating in activities and catastrophizing and that sort of thing? What advice would you give?
Yeah, there's lots of, I speak to a lot of parents, and what I often say is to try and, I guess, really listen to what their child is saying, and no matter how illogical the fear or the trigger for the anxiety is, what the child is actually experiencing is very real. So, and I also encourage them to be the voice for that child. So going into schools, letting teachers know, family members know, and understanding, because as a parent you are the voice for your child until they can start to do that for themselves.
So I know that you do, presentations and you advocate for anxiety issues. What's your thoughts or experience with others in terms of telling the teachers at school? We've just spoken about teachers. How do teachers respond in primary schools?
Look, in my experience, all the teachers that I've ever dealt with have been fantastic and really, really supportive. I do have, when I speak to a lot of parents, and quite often, I think nowadays there's a little bit more awareness around anxiety in young children, because a lot of, I guess a lot of people expect it to be sort of teenage and over, but in actual fact it does sort of start a lot earlier. So it is good to keep the teachers, because they're with them most of the day, and also it can be different in group environments, so where there's large classes and things like that.
Because that's the thing with, as we heard earlier, the teachers, I'm not sure how much of an education they get in terms of primary school, because as you said, secondary school, a little bit more about anxiety, but certainly in primary school, we're not really sure that children can even suffer from anxiety. I mean, I know you and I know that they can, but I think that some people question that as well.
And I think too, behaviours tend to be the first point. So the children can be completely withdrawn, or else they can actually act out in certain ways. And what it is, it's actually expressing a need. They don't know what the need is, and I guess that's where having that open communication with home makes it a lot easier for teachers.
And I think it's really hard for parents as well when you have your child in front of you. I know that a lot of parents that come and see me aren't sure if their child has anxiety or not, because there are some things that they're, they reflect back and say, well, that's what I was like as a child, which you said that you were, an anxious child as well. It's a difficult position for parents.
Oh, yeah, absolutely it is, because, and also too, there's a lot of parents that haven't suffered any anxiety. So I often say to them, it's like describing a colour to someone who can't see colour. It's really hard to describe it unless you've seen it. Now, because I had experienced it from a very young age, he mirrored, my son mirrored me, and that's why I was able to identify and
to actually do something about it. So what sorts of things would you advise parents to do if they find that their child has got a mental health condition? What would be your advice?
Absolutely getting as much support as they can, not only for the child but for themselves as well, like seeking support from either psychologists, definitely GP's first port of call to then sort of filter out, but even with the psychologist, see a psychologist for the child, but then also for yourself as a parent to help you manage to support your child.
I think that's great advice, actually, Nicky, because a lot of the people that I see, the children, I actually say that to the parents as well. They need to make sure that they tell someone and get support themselves as well. Look, thank you so much, Nicky, for being part of this show. I really appreciate you sharing your story with us. Thanks again for watching the Sally Ann Show. We hope you enjoyed it as much as we did, and we want your feedback. So contact us on our Facebook page or follow me on Twitter.